Yeah, it's been a long time, almost what is it, 51 years, 52 years since we've seen Earth from that distance. So,
Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know It All. I am super honored today to be with Scott Kidd Poteet, or Kidd, as you go by, who is going to be one of the crew members on the upcoming Polaris Dawn mission, which is now scheduled to launch at the end of August. Is that correct? Or is it September
end of
now?
August, yeah, we just
Yeah.
went official with a launch date of the 26th.
Cool. All
So
right.
we're 1 week away from quarantine starting.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, we're virtual anyway. So I was going to say it was good I caught you, but it doesn't really matter because it would be, hopefully the germs would not transmit through the internet. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. I noticed that you were a Thunderbird pilot, which is pretty darn amazing. That's no small accomplishment on its own. So yeah, let us know about your background.
Absolutely. So I pretty much grew up in the New Hampshire seacoast area, a small town called Durham, about an hour north of Boston.
Okay.
Uh, Went through elementary, middle school, high school, college, all in the same town. I'm a self-admitted terrible student. Um, Grades were academics were not my strong suit,
Right.
but I was fairly active. Cross country state champion in New Hampshire in high school, and that more or less got me into college.
Okay.
Going to the University of New Hampshire. Um,
Right.
Ended up getting a degree in outdoor education. So spent 4 years scuba diving, rock climbing, winter mountaineering, whitewater rafting.
I'm like, what was I
Very
doing majoring in physics? I should have done that. That would have been way more fun.
Yeah, it was. Well, I got involved in the ROTC program pretty early on
Oh,
my
cool. Okay.
freshman
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
So I was just looking for an academic program that I could really enjoy because I wanted to be a fighter pilot,
Right.
and
Right.
my exposure to that, growing up in the 80s, with the original Top Gun came out, the movie, The Right
Yeah.
Stuff was kind of a spark to, hey, I would love to do something like this.
Right.
So I looked into the ROTC program, and they were offering a go in the back of a KC 135 and just watch them refuel F-16s.
Right. Cool.
So I signed up, went to that, saw some F-16s get refueled. I puked the entire mission. I am prone to motion sickness.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That does not bode well
Yeah.
for the first 24 hours up in space. So yeah.
Well, they say it's completely unpredictable.
Okay.
Space
Okay.
adaptation syndrome is a lot different from motion sickness. So crossing my
Interesting.
fingers.
Interesting. There you go.
But I'm a puke and rally kind of guy.
That was your
So we'll
entire
see how.
college experience. There you go. Puke and
Yeah, maybe.
rally.
Uh,
Hypothetically.
but it was, that experience kind of sparked my interest in ROTC. Fast
Right.
forward, I graduated and went in, got commissioned, and went to pilot training and spent 20 years in the Air Force.
Right.
Throughout my Air Force career, I was blessed with a lot of different experiences. Graduated the Fighter Weapons School, which is the Air Force version of Top Gun. Selected to be
Cool.
a Thunderbird demonstration pilot, so did that for a couple of years. I commanded the aggressors, so more or less replicating the bad guys to help our guys train.
Right. Is that how
And then
you ended up getting hooked up with Jared? Because I know that he kind of did some of that stuff too.
kind of in both those experiences, being a Thunderbird as well as the aggressor commander,
Okay.
were my connection with Jared originally. That was 10, 15
Right.
years ago
Yeah.
when we
Gotcha.
originally met. But as you know, he's an avid pilot himself. Um, and as he evolved and progressed through his aviation career in the later stages, when he got into fighter jets, that's kind of where
Right.
we got hooked up. With he was doing a civilian demonstration team, and then later that evolved into providing adversary support as a contract
Right. Right.
service, which was a very successful
And man, I
business
can't
he
tell you
started.
how much I wish I knew that that was an actual legitimate career option. I was like, darn it.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, it was a brilliant idea. I mean,
Yeah.
we'd
Yeah.
done it since the early '70s.
Right.
Post Vietnam era, when we experienced some losses and needed to figure out a new way to train, they came up
Right.
with Red Flag and the aggressors. So he just took it to the next level by providing a lot more cost effective solution, utilizing retired, washed up fighter pilots like myself, and privately procured
Right.
fleets of fighter jets that were be otherwise sent to the boneyard.
Right. Right.
Um, So, anyways, we did that for several years, and that was very successful, providing that service. But
Cool.
that was my Air Force career. I
Yeah.
retired in
Yeah.
2016.
Right. Right. Okay.
Um, I was coming off of a deployment to Afghanistan, flying my last combat tour, and I didn't have the motivation to join the airlines. I wanted to do
Right.
something different.
Right.
And based on my relationship, when I had met Jared, he said, come work for me at Draken.
Cool.
So I jumped on board, and we did that for about 5 years until his passion for aviation evolved into
I was
space
gonna say he
exploration.
literally aimed higher.
Yeah,
So yeah. So there you go.
he's a visionary, so it was just a natural progression.
Right. Right.
Based on the conversations he was having with SpaceX,
Yeah.
and so that kind of kicked off our quest with Inspiration 4.
Right. And you were mission director, is that correct for Inspiration 4? Mission.
I cringe every time I hear that
Okay.
term, but more or less, yes. I was the director, coordinator, manager of the program on the
Right.
Inspiration 4 side.
Okay.
When I think of mission director at this point in my
Yeah. Yeah.
my space journey. It's all about the mission directors in mission control, who are doing the legit control and running the show. My role during Inspiration 4 was just to help coordinate logistics, the fundraising piece, anything and everything. I was just inspired by the whole vision of the project, and wanted to contribute and help out, as much as I possibly could.
Right. Right.
Dual hat. I was just working for Jared on the Shift 4 side after he had sold off Draken.
Right.
So I was doing some things for Shift 4, but once the space thing came up, I was like, that's more my style.
I was like, I will volunteer for this. So yeah. That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was
Okay.
such a great concept because when he first told me about it, it was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And he's like, you're not going on this, dude. This is all
Right.
about, we need to prove that space is accessible to any and everyone.
Right.
So we randomly selected his crew. He had this grand vision, which was extremely successful. Partnership with St. Jude, raising $250 million. So
Right.
it was just an awesome project to be involved with, and
Right.
that kind of
Right.
kicked everything off.
That's great. Yeah, and FYI, I did apply to be on that mission, so of course I did because I was like, who wouldn't? So and I've applied to be an astronaut twice and made it past the first round or two, but never have gotten too deep into it.
Nice.
So anyway, yeah, I'm quite the elephant in the room is I'm quite jealous of you because I would go. My wife is always like, "You're crazy," and I'm like, to this day, if somebody said you want to go up in space tomorrow, I would be like, just sign me in. So
I know.
I know that the reality
It's
is years of training to get there, but yeah. So
Yeah. Well, Inspiration 4 crew. That was, man. I think we told them in February,
right,
and they
right,
launched September.
yeah,
So
that's
that was
crazy.
a quick turn for them.
Yeah, yeah,
Not quite like our quest over the Polaris.
yeah.
We're
Yes.
approaching 3
So
years now.
yeah, let's talk about that. I want to talk about like the training and everything, but first, just let's discuss the mission profile. I was telling you before we started recording, I'm a huge space geek. My favorite sort of what mission series is actually Gemini because I feel like it's the middle child and it was always left out and but it's like it established everything. Putting people up on the Mercuries was basically just throwing some people up as a stunt. They really didn't do much. And Apollo was the outgrowth of Gemini. But I mean, we're talking about first multiple ships in space at the same time, first rendezvous, first docking, first spacewalk. I mean, all of these first that happened. Well, for the United States, of course, then there was the Soviets that were doing it too. But yeah, so why a spacewalk? Why 1,400 kilometers max altitude? Why do all these crazy things?
First off, I appreciate that comparison analogy. Obviously, we're standing on their shoulders.
Yeah,
They've accomplished so much more, and we would not be where we're at without the achievements of NASA,
right,
and what they've done thus far with Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, shuttle program. Um, but yeah, that was kind of the first analogy that we came up with when we started these discussions with SpaceX. It was towards the tail end of Inspiration 4, right before their launch, Jared continued his conversations about, what's next, what could chapter 2
Right.
look like, and in standard Jared fashion, it's like it's got to be elevated to this point. So
Right.
this was more of a concept of, hey, can we come up with a program that is a developmental focused project, multi-mission, and what does SpaceX want to accomplish over the next,
Right.
3, 5, 10 plus years? And obviously, Suits was part of that discussion, but based on the negotiations and the conversations he was having, this is the collaboration between the Polaris team and SpaceX.
Right.
It was a perfect marriage in the fact that we had been working with them with Inspiration 4, and everyone was motivated and everyone's committing resources to make this happen. And
Right.
with a focus on operational development type program, the first conversation Jared had with Elon about what could we accomplish, they
Yeah.
started coming up with these grandiose ideas, and very similar to what NASA did with the Gemini project. You got initial space
Right.
flight with Mercury. Let's just get to space.
Right.
And then the quest to get to the moon with the Apollo program. Well,
Right.
what do we need to accomplish to make that
Get
leap
that.
to get to the lunar surface? And just like you talked about, we got to figure out how to dock. We got to do multi-crew missions, longer durations. We got to do a spacewalk.
Right.
All these things have to be accomplished before we can even think about getting to the lunar surface.
Right.
In a similar fashion, SpaceX is kind of making this transition from the Falcon 9, very proven rocket,
Right.
focused on low Earth orbit, getting to the ISS. And then eventually they're making this transition to Starship.
Yeah. And just FYI, I'm going to put this up real quick. This is a CGI rendition of the spacewalk. So obviously not reality, but just so continue talking about this. But I thought people would enjoy seeing this as kind of hypothetical of what it might look like. So, yeah.
You bet. And so the end result of the conversation was a collaborative program that involves up to 3 missions. We affectionately called it the Polaris program, with the first mission being Polaris Dawn, and then ultimately the third mission being the first human flight of Starship.
Right. And has anybody found out what the middle mission is, or do you guys kind of mum on that at the moment?
No, we're still working through,
Okay.
everything and anything's on the table.
Right.
Obviously,
okay.
what's been in, on social and in the media about conversations regarding Hubble, those are still ongoing conversations. But
that would be very
overall,
cool, by the way. That'd be very cool.
yeah. But the biggest, focus is whatever we accomplish on Polaris Dawn and what we learn, we want to leverage that and continue this evolution of developing and moving forward. And just like we've set these lofty objectives with Polaris Dawn, we just want to continue moving the needle. We're gonna push, and eventually we'll get back to the lunar surface and Mars and beyond. And so, based on these conversations, we came up with the 4 primary objectives for Polaris Dawn, which is obviously right around the corner with a launch date of August 26th. And the 4 objectives being, doing the first commercial spacewalk, setting an low Earth orbit altitude record, testing Starlink from space for the very first time, and then the 40 or so science and research experiments that we have lined up. All, those were selected based on, again, what are the challenges that humans face with longer duration missions? What based on the limitations and challenges that we have of living in this capsule that will be brought down to vacuum, what experiments can we do that's going to help push that needle? So those are the 4 primary objectives, and that's what we've been working on for the last 2.5, almost 3 years now, is to prepare for that. And a lot of people ask, well, why all the delays? Why is it taking so long? Well, in the big scheme of things, it really hasn't. It's 3 years is nothing to develop a suit that is designed to go out in the vacuum of space.
Right.
So
And also, I can't recall if this is a first or not, but also to be your primary suit while you're flying the craft as well. And that's a big deal because usually the EVA suits are just gigantic, bulky things that you put on that you would not normally wear in the cabin. So that's really cool as well.
yeah, and the fact that what are the known entities going into this project? It's like we're going to be on Dragon.
Right.
Dragon has never been brought down to vacuum,
Right.
so they had to do modifications to the systems and make sure it could withstand the challenges of operating in a space environment.
Right.
And then they got to design a spacesuit.
Yep.
And that was, I would say, the biggest challenge that SpaceX faced over the course of the couple of years is, how do we design a spacesuit? And they started off with the baseline, the IVA suit.
Right.
And going into it, we knew there was limited capacity in this vehicle. And so therefore one suit was the only option, really.
Right.
There was no
Right.
option to do an EMU kind of, self-contained suit and store 4 of those inside this capsule. And unlike
Right.
the ISS with multiple modules, we got to bring the entire capsule down to vacuum.
Right.
Therefore, we're all in these EVA suits, and technically, we're all participating in the EVA. And this,
Yeah.
as far as I know, this is the first time that 4 astronauts have been involved in the same EVA at once.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I guess the record before would have been, was it Apollo 9 where they did the EVA? That's a little known
Mhm.
fact that most people don't know that there was an EVA in Apollo, but yeah. So but you look at this spacesuit is this is the one, right? This, I mean, or at least something. Obviously, there's an evolution of it all the time, but it looks at first glance very much like the one that you would just wear on a normal mission to the ISS or something. So it's very impressive that it's maintained the slim profile. It doesn't look super bulky. Of course, there's no life support system on it. It's cabled into the craft itself, but this is a spaceship right there. I mean, that's effectively what that is.
Absolutely, and it's
Yeah.
proven. I mean,
Yeah.
about a month ago we did our vacuum test down at Johnson Space Center,
Right.
and in pairs we'd go into the chamber and bring it down to vacuum,
Right.
and we were in our flight suits, proving that for us to experience, obviously to test the suit, and
Right.
for us to experience and build the confidence in the suit itself, and
Yeah. Probably the
very very comfortable. Yeah, yeah,
cool. Cool.
very very comfortable suit. It's hard, especially with the reclined seats, and the durations that we do spend in the suit pressurized. It's hard not to fall asleep. Um,
Awesome.
so we have a tendency to take these micro naps,
Right.
but we got to
Right.
constantly do these comm checks just to make sure that we're all awake and paying attention.
Right. Right. There
Um,
you go. Don't fall asleep on us
but
there, man.
but the suit is very very similar to the IVA. What's unique about the entire process was every time we'd show up for training, and it was more or less every other week ish for the last couple of years, some new modification would have been accomplished, and they'd have done something, and we ultimately had built this like Frankenstein type suit, because they would go through all these different iterations. They tried the different joints, different type of innovative technology to see what would work better under different pressurizations. The thermals were constantly a focus. Mobility, obviously, a big deal with the EVA.
Right.
Cooling, and avionics. The HUD was just this simple little, literally we left on a Friday, showed up on Monday, and they had this new, very basic heads up display modified on the helmet on Monday, and since then they've gone through multiple iterations to come up with what we're going to actually use for flight. So
Right. Right.
it's
Very
all
cool.
one piece. You don and doff the suit with a more or less a spiral waist zipper, but it's all attached to the helmet, and the top and bottom are all the same. You kind of wiggle
Wow.
in the arms initially, and then
Okay.
the helmet goes over the cranium. And then once you get the upper body situated, you kind of
Oops.
like just put on your pants and spiral zipper,
Right.
and you have a bladder zipper and an external
Okay.
zipper, all on the waist, and then you have similar spiral zippers on each arm. That
Wow.
allows you to have, your arms exposed to, if outside of pressurization, to do any type of work that you need to be done.
Right. Right.
But what's pretty amazing is the dexterity of the gloves. You know, it was quite eye opening. From I had been using a modified IVA suit throughout training for the longest time, and then the first
Right.
time I got into my flight suit pressurized,
Right.
I'm like, yeah, they pressurized it. I'm like, okay, you guys can pressurize it any time, and they're like, no, kid, you are pressurized right now. And it was
No
just
way,
like
really? Wow.
the yeah, the mobility was a lot better than the actual IVA suit that I experienced. Um,
Wow. Wow.
so yeah.
That's very cool. So yeah, so let's talk as long as we're talking about suits, let's go a little bit down this rabbit hole here. So there's a, Hollywood trope of, oh, we got to go out and like blast the asteroid, and the guys just, they're in the suit and they just go whoop, and they throw the spacesuit on, they're out the door. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, I know this from scuba diving, that we're dealing with multiple different pressure profiles, we're dealing with different O2 nitrogen profiles. Um, there are a lot of steps that you have to go through in order not to basically get the bends, to get decompression illness. So how do you go about like dealing with that in leading up to it? I hear that your profile is actually quite unique in on the Polaris Dawn, because you're going to actually start after you launch. Basically, as soon as you launch, you're going to start changing the pressure and the atmospheric concentrations in the cabin. Correct?
Absolutely, and that's
Yeah. Okay.
was one of the challenges of doing an EVA, and and bringing the capsule down to vacuum long enough to make it a productive experience.
Right.
We're limited on capacity and amount of gaseous that we can bring with us: nitrogen, oxygen, and
Yeah.
nitrox.
Yeah.
Um, so therefore, it's like we don't have the luxury to do a multi-hour pre-breathe on 100% oxygen.
Mhm.
Therefore, we had to come up with a creative solution to mitigate and prevent us from getting the bends,
Yeah. Okay.
decompression sickness.
Right. So
So
so so just for people who might not, so I mean, at Earth atmosphere of near sea level, we're at 1 bar or a 15.1 psi. Is that correct? Anyway, so we have approximately that much pressure.
14.7.
50.7. So sorry, I was thinking metrics. So I have a hard time remembering imperial stuff. But anyway, you're not at, or are you at that in the cabin itself? So on a normal mission to the ISS, would you normally be at 1 bar or 15.7 psi for the duration,
Uh,
or is it lower than that?
14.7, and I
Okay. Okay.
don't quote me on this, but I think they are.
Yeah.
They have that ability or that luxury on the
Yeah.
ISS.
Okay.
We have come up with this like stair-stepping protocol that um, starts out at a certain PSI, atmospheric PSI, and then slowly work our way down to
Right.
ultimately vacuum.
Yeah. So tell me about, so you start off at 21% oxygen, basically the atmospheric mix, right? With about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Is that correct when you launch, or?
I would be guessing on what the final numbers are going to be, and I know they
Right.
work through the protocol, and they're constantly tweaking it. Um, but just to take a step back, we went to JSC a couple of years ago to kind of run through a similar profile just to get data points. We had our own doppelgangers. There was 8 participants in this just to get more data.
Right.
And then since then, they've kind of evolved the protocol over the course of a couple of years, and ultimately we're going to start below atmospheric pressure,
Okay.
14.7. It's lower than that, but with a slightly higher oxygen concentration.
Okay. Okay.
And we're going to be there for a couple days. and then there'll be it's a 5-step phase down.
Okay.
And then we'll slowly lower the PSI over a course of a couple hours. We'll bump
Right.
up the oxygen, and then again we'll slowly work down, and then eventually we'll get into our suits, and then 100% oxygen. Hopefully, dilute ourselves of all risk bubbles, nitrogen bubbles,
Right.
and then we'll bring it down to vacuum once we're pressurized.
Cool. And the suits are at about 5 psi, or about a third of atmospheric. Is that correct?
Yeah, just above 5 psi,
Okay. Gotcha.
psid. So
Yeah. Cool.
it will decrease as our cabin pressure decreases.
Right. Right. Okay. And so I mean, just really quickly, it's the old soda bottle thing. Like if you unscrew a soda bottle really fast, it bubbles up. You don't want this happening in your body because there's a lot of nitrogen in particular that's in it's basically in liquid form at atmospheric pressure. If you suddenly release that pressure, it would boil, which would be a terrible thing in your body. And
Yes.
so you want to lower that, and you want to get rid of as much nitrogen in your bloodstream as possible at the same time, which is why you're moving towards pure oxygen at that point.
Hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's a great analogy, and it's good for everyone to kind of understand that concept.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to avoid.
Right. Okay, so the second piece of this is the suits. When you're actually in vacuum, and of course, this was a big problem for Gemini and for Apollo and for the Soviets and and the space shuttle and everybody, especially the hands, but also the elbows, the shoulders, everything. You're in a balloon basically, right? If you think about it, if you imagine a giant balloon that's blown up, it's going to be stiff. It has a great deal of stiffness. So how has SpaceX, worked on these joints to make them as mobile as possible when you're in a 5 psi suit in zero pressure?
So and that's the technology that they've uh, developed and
Right.
innovated over the last few years. They've
Right.
gone through many, many different iterations of that joint.
Yeah.
Um, and there's one on the shoulder, there's one on the elbow, there's one on the wrist, all providing those movements. So you can kind of like in a runner's position,
Hmm.
the shoulder will rotate in that direction. The arm will rotate, and the wrist will rotate, and even pressurized. Those are mobility functions, if you will,
Right.
that we can utilize to do whatever we need to do. Whether it's in Jared and Sarah's case, open and close the hatch manually. Because initially they have a revolving safety lever that will
Right.
release the lock, and then they can manually uh, open the hatch and close the hatch, so they can operate that way. And then the whole purpose, once they are doing the EVA outside the capsule, they will be doing certain drills and experiments associated with the movement to better understand the mobility of this suit. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
That's
Right.
you
Yeah.
know uh,
Yeah.
that's exactly the movement that Jared and Sarah would execute in order to close or open a
Right.
hatch.
Right. And this, it sounds like the focus has been on the upper body, not as much on the lower body. So this would not be an EVA suit you would probably want to use on the moon or Mars, because it sounds like it might have good lower body mobility. Or am I wrong about that from understanding?
I believe it's the same joints
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
for the
Yeah.
knees or I guess it would be. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. But
Okay.
yes, the big focus has been the upper body.
Right.
I guess it's a blessing of being in space. You float more or less until you're
Yeah.
on, some gravitational properties, whether you're on the lunar surface or Mars.
Right.
But they'll certainly get there. And, the whole purpose of this developmental program was you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Yeah.
people ask about the umbilical, umbilical. Um, uh, just again, based on limitations that we experience in this capsule and the capacity, uh,
Right.
that is the life support that we're utilizing for this. What we learn from this experience and this mission, they'll take this suit and make the next iteration,
Right.
and whether it
Right.
is a self-contained life support system or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, this is the beginning of their development, and it's been hugely successful. This team is unbelievable.
Yeah,
How far they've come over the last couple of years.
amazing. And so it's going to be Jared and Sarah, correct? Are going outside, and you two are staying inside to command and control, I guess, to make sure somebody's in there minding the fort. So yeah,
Absolutely, and
yeah,
it's uh, another element of the suit is the helmet and the visor.
yeah, yeah,
I believe this is the only EVA suit that is one layer on the
yeah,
visor.
yeah, yeah.
So that's quite unique, and there's multiple properties to the visor. It's got anti-fog coating inside to because if you do build up the thermal in the suit, because it's obviously multi-layered, and
Right.
heat retention can be a concern. There's
Yeah.
anti-fog coating, obviously the UV protection from the sun. It's got the avionics, and it's got great visibility.
Wow.
But
Yeah, you can see
you
it's
are
got all
wearing
that.
a helmet.
Yeah.
So us, with Ann and I in the capsule, we're the eyes and ears,
Yeah.
sit in the outboard seats in order to monitor the procedures, because everything has been choreographed, and then we spent a lot of time in the simulator going through
Right.
every second of the EVA itself.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we're there to be eyes and ears, and handle any emergency situation. We're there
Right.
at the controls to be able to execute.
Gotcha. Please tell me you're gonna like sneak over to the side and look out while you got a chance, though. I hope you get to look up and at least see.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
I am going to
There's a lot of
assume that that
cameras,
will happen.
though.
Yeah, I know. But you
I
got
don't
to
know. There's a lot of cameras. I might get caught.
you got to sneak a peek, man. So
Mhm.
so how are they going to move? Obviously, you can push off from the spacecraft and go floating out into infinity, but I haven't seen that particularly. Obviously, the early Geminis, they had that little gas thruster. They ended up not using that. They ended up using handholds. I think it was Buzz Aldrin actually who came up with a lot of the methodology for climbing around the outside of the ship. But how are they going to, because once you're floating out in space, unless you're pulling on the umbilical, you got nothing to hold on to. So yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of a baby step approach.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
obviously concerns with TPS and outside the capsule that we
Yeah.
don't want to get anywhere near.
Right.
Um, there is a limitation on how long the umbilical is going to be
Right.
uh, with restraints. So initially, they're going to be at the top, just outside the vehicle.
Okay. So
There is
kind
a
of like this,
additional.
like the picture showing. Yeah. Okay.
Where's
So
a
sorry, is it more
I got
like
a
this?
frozen screen. Oh, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Very similar. A
Yeah.
little bit further.
Okay.
Everything's within reach from what's
Right.
referred to as the Skywalker. It's
Right.
the
Okay.
device that's been developed. The lower portions there, you can see it.
Yeah.
Um,
This guy. Okay.
but again, everything's within a point of contact to be able
Okay.
to maintain maneuverability. Um,
Right. Right.
during
Okay.
during the EVA itself.
Okay, so something that's more along the lines of this image of him sort of just floating there with the long umbilical, maybe not. That may be a little aggrandized.
We tried to convince the hires at B, but we're just not quite there yet.
Right, right. But that's such as life. That's okay. But I just wanted to know that because I immediately, as soon as I started thinking about that, I was like, well, unless you're going to hand over hand the umbilical cord to get back, you got nothing. You're just sort of floating out there. So yeah. So okay. So it's
Yeah,
going to be more like that little
despite the
platform.
tether being
Yeah.
right, despite the tether being Kevlar and very very sturdy, they don't want us pulling on the single
Yeah.
point of life support.
Yeah, that's probably wise. So okay, so it's going to be more along the lines of grab the little sort of hand railing thingy that's there and use that as a support. So okay, very cool.
Yep,
Right.
and to test the mobility and the grip of multi-axis, because it's got vertical rigging, it's got horizontal, and the entire time they're up there, they're going through a test protocol to
Right.
more or less grade how well the suit functions
Right.
in a vacuum in space.
Okay. And I assume that you two will also do that because you'll have a chance to probably interact with the control systems and things inside the craft to make sure that they're working properly in a vacuum as well. So,
Yeah, we have full reign for any type of um, testing of ourselves with our arms and in our seats. The capsule is quite spacious. It's
yeah. Yeah.
again, it's all relative. You go and look at the. In fact, I took a field trip over to the California Science Center just to take a look at the. I believe it was Gemini 11
Right.
capsule that
Right.
there. I was just in awe of how little space
Yeah. Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
long they were up
2 weeks.
there in
Two
that
weeks, right?
space.
I think the longest duration was 2 weeks,
It's
14 days. Yeah,
insane.
that's nuts.
It's not
Wow.
much bigger than an MRI machine.
Yeah, exactly. I've at
So,
Kennedy Space Center, they have kind of like just boilerplate mock-ups of the Gemini and the Mercury, and I'm 5'10", and when I got in the Mercury capsule without a spacesuit on, I was like, oh my gosh, if they closed the top, it would whack my head. So
mhm,
there's no
yeah,
room for anything in there. I was just like, this is tiny. So yeah, it's pretty nuts how small the space was on those craft. There's a reason
yeah,
why they were small guys. That they were not allowed to be 6'2" or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Well,
So
Jared's well over 6 feet, so
yeah,
it's good that the three of us are small people.
yeah, yeah. There you go. I got to meet him at X Takeover, and he's very thin, but much taller than I expected. So I was like, oh, he is a pretty tall guy. So yeah.
Well,
So
he'll appreciate that description. He's a big runner.
oh, there you go. Yeah, I noticed that you're a triathlete. I've done a couple of sprint triathlons, but never a full one. They're scary. So you've been out in Kona in Hawaii to do the real big one. What's that? The Ironman. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's the World Championships in Hawaii. I've done
Yeah.
15 full the Ironman distance. I signed up for Ironman Lake Placid. I took a 10-year hiatus after I retired from the military
Right.
because I'd done 15 up that point, and
Ooh,
I wanted to get back into them over the last couple of years. So I signed up for Lake Placid in 2023,
okay.
thinking, we're going to space. I'll have plenty of time to train. Well,
Right.
you know, delays happened, and so I had to punt
Yeah.
23 to
Right.
24. And
Yeah.
so I was
Then that.
supposed to do it. I was training for Ironman Lake Placid, and so that got punted. And so now I'm signed up to do Ironman Chattanooga down in Tennessee
Oh, cool. Okay.
in
Nice.
in September. So end of September. So the training is like it's very intense right now. Like I have a 5 hour bike ride in the morning.
Wow.
Um, and today was a swim bike run. In fact, when we're done here, I'm going to go to the pool and get my laps in.
Jeez. That's absolutely nutty. Plus the fact you're spending the rest of your day working on your training for the mission. So, yeah, that's pretty
Right.
crazy. So logistically, I guess I wanted to ask that question, and this sort of like rotates back into that. But in terms of like mental, physical, and logistical training, I was trying to come up with an umbrella term for all of the procedures that you have to learn. But what is a common day like for you? Maybe not while you're in the midst of training for the Ironman, but let's just cast it back 3 or 4 months where you're just kind of in a regular training mode.
Oh man, there's nothing common about this entire program.
There you go.
I guess the best way to describe it is kind of to characterize the different types of training that we've gone through.
Right,
We learned a lot during Inspiration 4, which was kind of mimicked based on what NASA does for their astronauts. So
right,
we have the basics. We have a lot of academics to learn the systems and procedures, and then we spend a lot of time in the simulators.
right,
There's multiple types of simulators. The full up simulator that's an actual capsule. Other than microgravity, it's the same systems, it's the
right,
same cargo payloads. And then there's the cockpit simulators. It's more just the screens to allow us to interact
right,
and do some training on that. So we spent a lot of time going through procedures and uh, very similar to what we do in the flying community and being a fighter pilot in the Air Force. You go through various phases of flight. You learn the blocking and tackling initially, just how to fly the aircraft,
Right.
and then how to handle it in emergency situations. And then it's like, okay, let's take this to the next level. Let's go through, more advanced phases. So that's where we started to add in like contingencies for the uphill. On launch we have
Right.
emergencies. How do we handle those as far as understanding the systems, executing the procedures, and then working together as a crew.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and then it's like, okay, we got to learn how to do the EVA. So
Yeah.
we don't have the luxury of an MBL like NASA. And since this was a developmental program and the suit was going through its creation in parallel to our training, we didn't think it was prudent for us to try to figure out how to, put these suits um, in a tank and do some training that way. So what they did was come up with a very creative suspension system. Utilizing physics, they
Okay.
took a harness system that you kind of see on Cirque du Soleil, this offloading type harness that you could wear over the externally from the EVA suit, and then when you put it in certain modes, you can literally move yourself around by the push of a finger,
That's cool.
as
Wow.
close to microgravity as possible.
Right.
So once you're away in lift mode, you can kind of go into this float mode, and you can maneuver as needed in multiple axes, and train as necessary
Wow.
in the suit, pressurized on Earth at 1G.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
we spent a lot of time doing that, and then to kind of gel as a team, we got to do a lot of the fun stuff together. So we
Right.
did the scuba diving, we climbed mountains together, we fly
Cool.
fighter jets together. Um, we do a lot of that, and people ask, well, why do you do all that? It's actually very, very productive and helpful to prep for what we're going to be going through.
Right.
Um, you know, uh, the explanation of climbing a mountain. Well, you're on the side of a mountain. You're dehydrated. You're dealing with altitude stress.
Yeah. Yep.
You're grumpy because your sleep sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no easy Control Alt Delete
Right.
option on the side of a mountain. You got to deal with
That
the
is for damn
circumstance.
sure. That is for damn sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah.
you end up learning a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about how you operate as a team.
Right.
So we did that a couple times with Rainier and Cotopaxi, and yeah.
Oh, nice. You did Cotopaxi. Nice. Yeah. I assumed Rainier because that just seems to be the standard mountain to climb for like that kind of training. But so interesting. Um, so that it all sounds amazing, and it sounds like the team has to gel, of course, as well. And that's the psychology of that is very important because you're going to be in a high stress environment for 5 days. I mean, that's kind of the mission profile. But it sounds like the team is a collective now. It sounds like you all know each other well and function well together. I assume that millions of anomalies have been thrown your way by the simulation team. They're always like, haha, now this just went wrong. Now this just went wrong. So that you have like a lot of experience with weird things happening. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's kind of a funny experience that we had in the very beginning, the very first sim.
Right.
So to put this in context, you got Jared, kind of already been
Right.
through, proven astronaut
Yeah.
who's already flown the same capsule that we're going to be in.
Right.
And then you
Oh,
got
is it
Anna and
literally is
Sarah
it
and their
literally the same
backgrounds.
capsule? So it's that capsule?
It's resilience. It's the same
Wow.
capsule. So they took off
That's
the
super
cupola.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have
Okay.
Anna and Sarah,
Right.
um, SpaceX engineers with background being mission directors as well as cores, and Sarah taught Jared how to be an astronaut, so he put him through the ringer. So it was like, and then you got Kidd, who's time to play catch up. But the first sim that we had, you got a lot of cooks in the kitchen as soon as the anomalies started being thrown our way,
Mm.
and I'd say more or less we overthought the circumstances, and we failed miserably as a crew on the first sim. And it
There
was
you
a
go.
very humbling experience. And we realized, we have a lot to learn to function
Right.
as a crew. But I've been very, very thankful to have the crew that we do have because, they more or less wrote the playbook on these procedures. That's one of Anna's jobs is to write the contingency procedures in the situation of emergency, and Sarah writes the training plans
Right.
to put astronauts through training. And
Very cool.
Jared's just a brilliant dude who can retain a lot of information.
And
So
and you're like,
I
I'm
like to
keeping up
hide
with
behind those three.
everything. There you go. So,
No, I can't even. I can't even claim that.
there you go. I'm sure you are being exceptionally humble and don't deserve that. For the two SpaceX engineers, were they selected because SpaceX wants this experience internal to the company? Are they going to have something to do with the Starlink laser demo that's going to be sort of it's not your main comm system, right? It's going to be kind of running in parallel to like check it out and make sure that it works properly. Is that correct?
Absolutely, it's in parallel. We have our standard communication systems.
Right.
Will be downlinked to ground stations, and we'll be working with teacher satellites. Just your standard ways of communication.
Right.
What we're doing with Starlink is kind of above and beyond, and
Right.
we're going to be testing it out. They'll be doing tests as soon as we're on orbit, but
Right.
our test won't occur until I believe day 4 is when we do our
Oh,
initial
okay.
testing.
Okay.
Um, but if if it far exceeds its expectations and it's running and it's working, there are opportunities for us to kind of test it out. Um,
Cool.
but that's kind of one of our big objectives is this global communication utilizing Starlink.
Right.
It's kind of kept under wraps. It's this top secret thing that we're going to be doing, but it
Cool.
will be globally broadcast once if
That's
and when it
awesome.
works.
Wow, cool. And of course, I think I can safely say it will involve lasers. So we will have lasers.
Exactly, lasers.
So
Yeah.
I mean, how could you go wrong if you have spaceships and lasers? I mean, that's awesome. Life is
I
great.
know. And then the way SpaceX does things, I mean, it's going to be top notch. I've seen a lot of the webcasts that they've already produced. It's really cool. That's going to be a couple hours leading up to launch.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's like a very dark 30 type launch window.
That's okay. I'll be up.
And
I'll
that's
be up.
just based on and that's just based on mitigating MMOD risks and where we
Yep.
are in the orbit.
Yeah.
Because our orbit is 190, highly elliptical. It's 190 by initially 1200. We'll do a couple
Right.
passes at 1200, check out the systems, do some, and then we'll phase up to our peak apogee of 1400 kilometers.
Right. Right.
Um, we got to get through the South Atlantic anomaly
Yeah, let's
before we
talk about
do
that.
phase up.
So
Yeah.
a couple of the whys. Number one, why the South Atlantic anomaly? And I think you're going to pass through it twice, right? So that's a big deal. Um, and then second, you're going to 1,400 kilometers, which is higher than anyone since Apollo, if I'm remembering correctly. And then you're going to lower it back down again for the spacewalk and everything. So why those two particular things? Like those seem highly dangerous. I mean, going through the South Atlantic anomaly is something that is not generally considered to be a good idea. How's that? Which, by the way, is a big
Yeah,
hole
I
in the
mean,
radiation shielding of the Earth. So there's a lot of radiation that gets down there. Yeah.
absolutely, and just based on us, launching at a 51.6 degree, we're going to end up going through the anomaly at some point. Anyways, just based on the
Yep.
phasing of the orbit, it's
Right.
just depending on the altitude. It's more significant at higher altitudes.
Right.
But based on the modeling that they've done, it's similar to living on the ISS. Our mission is similar to living on the ISS for 3 months. the
Okay.
amount of radiation that's going to be exposed. And
Right.
the reason, even to take the reason why we're doing it is, again, this is intent to push the envelope and continue to move the needle on space exploration. Um,
Right.
we're gonna have to send astronauts back through the Van Allen belts to get to back to the moon and eventually to Mars. We
Right.
got to understand what the impact is on systems as well as the human body. So we're fully prepared to handle any anomalies that the systems experience. Dragon's never been to this altitude,
Right.
so this will be its first. Um, the reason why we chose 1400, the like you referenced, Apollo 17 was the last time we've been this high. Obviously, they're a different ball game. They left the orbit
Yeah.
uh, with low Earth orbit where we're at. The highest was Gemini 11 back in 1966, and they touched right around 1,369 kilometers.
See,
So
it's
we
get
threw it
just a
out there.
little higher.
Hey, let's go a little higher, 1,400. And
There you go.
we only have so many orbits through at that apogee.
Right. Right.
Again, it's to manage the risks involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and based on the modeling that they executed, this was the protocol they came up with the profile.
Cool. Cool. A couple of whys. I've kept you on for a long time, so I'm gonna let you go, and you could ask me questions if you want. But a couple of whys. A couple of whys, first of all, and these are not really for me, but I think for the general public. The first big why is why do this? Like I think I'm dialing it back to Apollo and thinking about all the protests that there were in the streets, and people are like, spend your money on Earth instead of in space. Why do a mission like this?
Honestly, why not? I mean, there's
Awesome.
I mean, we're curious as humans.
Yeah.
There's so much out there to explore, um, and it's why can't we just allocate resources to these ventures? Um, there's so much positivity that can come out, whether it's just as simple as inspirational,
Right.
for us to venture among the stars and explore and discover new things. The science and technology that is developed from these missions. We've got 40 science and research experiments, and
Yeah.
if our intent is to expand our space exploration and go for longer durations and open up the aperture and allow more people to be able
Right.
to experience space, we've got to be able to manage healthcare in general. So we're doing simple things like doing experiments that will better understand intracranial pressure, um,
Right.
what the impact is to that SANS has on the human body, space adaptation syndrome, or
Right.
space. What is it? Space flight associated neuroocular syndrome.
There we go.
It's more or
Yeah.
less when you have the pressures are different on the human body than they are at 1G when you're in microgravity.
Right.
So we need to better understand those. So we have certain experiments that are going to address that. CGM, we're going to be wearing a glucose monitor. We don't know if that monitor will work in space.
Yeah.
Um, so
No.
it's simple stuff like that that will benefit future space travel,
Right.
um, as well as the accomplishments and the discoveries that they've done historically.
Right.
Uh, we're going to try to open up those doors and provide better healthcare here back on Earth as well.
Cool. Very interesting. And I think, the why not is a really good answer to this thing. It's this human beings are kind of, I think by nature, at least some of us are explorers. That's what we love to do. And kind of killing off that and saying that's not a valid endeavor is it's a belittling or a diminishing of humanity. I think, I'm not saying everybody needs to be a crazy explorer, but there are some who do love to do that, and that's part of human nature. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then I definitely want to touch on St. Jude. And I guess the question, just a general question, why do this mission with St. Jude? Obviously, Inspiration 4 was also associated with St. Jude. Jared has, I really appreciate that Jared has an idea of trying to do good for a more general public when doing these kinds of missions. So I don't know. Just what do you think about that? What do you think about that aspect of the mission?
Well, St. Jude is near and dear to my heart because I was I was given the opportunity to work closely with their team during Inspiration 4. So
Right.
I was having daily meetings and I understand their organization very well. And I just absolutely loved that experience. There was nothing bad about it.
Cool.
And the good that we saw by raising that $250 million in support of their efforts was extremely rewarding. And we could see the benefit just in the patients that we were able to meet. And again, we want to make this bigger than ourselves. So
Right.
based on those relationships, why not continue these efforts? This is a little more on the supporting their vision
Hmm.
and awareness of what
Okay.
they're trying to accomplish. They have something. They have an international program where they're trying to expand their reach to more remote locations around the world.
Oh, cool.
It's their global initiative. It's what it's referred to as. Uh, and we thought that was fairly consistent with our efforts with Starlink
Yeah.
and trying to expand their reach and capability around the globe by utilizing Starlink. Um, and so to kind of kick this off, we brought a couple Starlinks to very remote locations that were concurrent with their global initiative. So we went to the Philippines. We sent some to Chile. Um,
Yeah.
we brought some over to the Ukraine as they were moving. At the kickoff of the Ukraine conflict, they were moving
Right.
some of their hospitals out of country in some bordering regions, Moldova, Poland, but they had no way to communicate. So those patients
Right.
that were being um, dislocated from their homes in the Ukraine, they were not getting the care they needed. So we brought some Starlink dishes over there. We brought some to the Philippines, and we met some patients firsthand. And this was the first time that Starlink had been brought into the country, Philippines. Um,
Wow. Wow.
and so, who we met were patients that would live hours and hours in the jungles and be required care. Well, to receive that care, they'd have to travel
Right.
to the cities hours away from their family and friends, and sometimes their protocol requires treatment for months, two, three,
Yeah.
6 months at a time.
Yeah.
They're not in their school. They're not getting an education. They're not with their family and friends. You provide them the Starlink. As long as you got electricity, they can start
Yeah.
communicating immediately with their families, get their education in these distant locations.
Wow.
Uh, Not to mention the telemedicine that Starlink can provide.
Right.
Um, you can have these. You can continue the care once these patients return back to their homes. They can continue to get care via Starlink um, from St. Jude.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing combination. That's just
Yeah.
that's like a use of technology that is really, really laudable. I mean, what can you say bad about that? That's just all to the good. And of course, the ability to educate for people to educate themselves in areas that have not had that capacity before. Another amazing thing that Starlink also is providing people now, and telemedicine is going to only improve. So yeah, all of that is really, really impressive and amazing. Um, well, Kidd, I have to say I'm just super thrilled about this. I All I can say is best of luck. I hope that you are going to have an amazing flight and there will not be any anomalies and it will all be smooth sailing and you'll have a great time. And hopefully we'll get a chance to, chat again like afterwards on the back end and you can talk about your experiences and maybe share a few pictures or something. Hopefully a little peek out,
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to
a
do
little
that.
peek out the middle to see the space again. So yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long time, almost what is it, 51 years, 52 years since we've seen Earth from that distance. So
Wow. That is a
we're
laudable goal in its own right. That's amazing. Cool.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And everyone, please follow Polaris Dawn. I'll put information and everything in the description, of course. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be an epic journey, and please do follow along. I will try to live stream or something. So if you want to follow me on the day of the launch, which should be the 26th, as long as things don't slip at all. And aside from that, everybody, we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.